The Supervisor of Election maintains the list of registered voters for Polk County. The Supervisor also qualifies candidates for county offices and receives candidate campaign financial disclosure reports. The office administers all elections and provides support for municipal elections, secures polling places, hires and trains election workers, and provides information for statistics on voter registration and voters and elections. Coming up on Polk Place, we're going to talk primary elections. Make sure you stick around. Welcome to Polk Place. I'm your host, Brian Lacey, and joining me in studio is Supervisor of Election, Lori Edwards. Good to see you again.
Always good to be here, Brian.
Yeah, it seems like about this time of the year you always stop in, make a visit with us, let us know what's going on.
That's right.
Kind of a busy time of the year for the supervisor elections.
It is. We're approaching our primary election and then, of course, a general election following that in November. So we're already training our many election workers and programming our voting machines.
Well, for the average resident, I don't think they really, we heard it in the intro, what you guys really do, but what does it really take to get ready for this time of year for you?
Well, most people would be surprised. I think it's kind of like the electricity. You think you just turn on the light and you turn on the switch and the electricity happens and you take it for granted. Well, elections are that way also. Just to give you a sense, there are 167 different polling locations around Polk County. We have about, for this primary election, 500 different ballot styles, and it takes to run just one election here in Polk County 1,700 workers. And see, they all need to be trained in advance. So we run about 80, that's 80 training classes.
Wow, so now we know what you've been busy with and what you've been doing. Let's talk about what's the most important thing that you want the voters to know?
Probably that there's some deadlines coming up, especially if you're interested. I'm going to get away from the primary election for a minute and say that October 9th is the final deadline if anybody wants to vote in that November general election. So I just want to make sure everybody realizes that you have to be registered by October 9th. The deadline to register for the August 28th primary election has already passed, but the other deadline to remember for the primary election, August 22nd, is the last day if you want to request a ballot be mailed to you.
Now let's talk terminology. People kind of get lost, and on the website there's a statement about a closed primary. What exactly does a closed primary mean?
You asked what we do when we're busy. This closed primary pretty much keeps us busy explaining this, Brian. So I want to tell you, a lot of folks are not familiar with it. Here in Florida, the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party only allow voters who are members of that party to participate in their primary elections. So what that means is on August 28th, whether you request a mail ballot, go to an early voting site, or walk into one of our precincts, what will happen is, based on your party affiliation on file with the election office, you will be issued either a ballot that has the Democratic races on it, the Republican races on it, or if you're not a Democrat or Republican, maybe you're a member of one of those smaller parties or not party affiliated, there's also a ballot for you.
Now, we heard Democrat, Republican, and one thing that you mentioned was precinct. How does one figure where they're going to be voting? How do you know which precinct you go to?
That's a great question, because we want to make sure they show up in the right place on Election Day. Nobody wants to hear you're in the wrong place. And on Election Day, you only can show up at your precinct. It's not like an early voting site where you can show up anywhere. There's a couple ways to find out. The first is if you have your voter information card, and we mailed those earlier this summer to all the voters, so maybe they still have theirs.
I've got mine.
All right, says right on there, here's your polling location, vote here. Okay, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to go to our website, polkelections.com, and you can type in your address and it will tell you where your polling location is. I suggest you do this advance of Election Day, because it may be something, even if it's close, that you're not familiar with. It could be a quarter mile that way, and every time you pull out of your house you go this way and don't know that it's there. And then finally, we're happy for anybody to call us. We'd rather you call us in advance. Let us tell you where you need to go on Election Day. And that number is 534-5888.
I always enjoy going to the precincts and seeing the hard work of the folks working the elections. But my parents are really big on voting by mail. Let's talk a little bit about the voting by mail. How does that come about?
Voting by mail, first of all, is gaining in popularity. It's just soaring. In fact, there's almost 100,000 people who voted, it was like 95,000, that voted by mail in the last presidential election, just in Polk County alone. It's just crazy how popular it is. And what you do is you go on our website, you send us an email, you give us a phone call, or you can fill out a form. There's so many different ways. You just request a ballot by mail and tell us, do you want it just for this election or do you want it to come for a couple years? And then any election that you're eligible to vote in, including those municipal elections or the special elections that you may not be aware of, we automatically send you a ballot about a month in advance. You get to take your time, study the issues with the ballot in front of you. I like to say you can vote in your pajamas if you want. Just take your time and get that ballot back to us by 7 p.m. on Election Day. That's why your parents like it, you know. They're voting in their pajamas.
Surprisingly, they were. And when they see this, they're going to be so mad.
Me or you?
Me.
Oh, okay, good.
I want to talk a little bit about advance voting early. Let's talk about, will that be happening this election day?
Yes, we have advance voting at 9 centers around Polk County. And unlike your precinct, where your precinct on Election Day, you have to go where you're assigned. Anyone can go to any of the 9 early voting sites. So for instance, maybe you live in Winter Haven but work in Bartow. You want to take your lunch hour and go to the Bartow early voting site, that's fine. We're open from from 10 until 6 every day, weekends included, August 18th through 25th.
What are some of the things that the residents will be voting on specifically in Polk County this election?
There is quite a bit on the ballot, and I have to say this is one of those elections where people are still trying to find their way and learn. Locally, there are 3 school board races that will be decided in this August 28th primary election. In those school board races, it's not a primary, it's the final election. So people who have interest in school board definitely don't want to miss this election. We also have primary elections for county commission. We have some state legislative races. County judge races will be decided in August. That's not primary. The primary on both the Republican and Democratic side for who they want their nominee to be for governor. And then ultimately, not in August, but in November, a very hotly contested U.S. Senate race.
One of the things that a lot of people, they like to know in advance, you know, who's on the ballot. Is there a possibility for an advance ballot?
It's a great idea. Yes, in fact, they're on our website already and will be right up until Election Day, polkelections.com. Additional to that, we'll be mailing a sample ballot, and so people may have already received it. Every voting household in Polk County will receive a sample ballot in the mail, and we'll be putting them in the newspapers. So that's the website. Look for your mailbox. Check out the newspapers, and if all else fails, give us a call. We're happy to stick one in the mail to you.
We had talked about the people coming to work for you during the election time. And if somebody's interest has been piqued in that, how would they go about becoming an elections worker?
We're always looking for new folks to work the election. It's really challenging and fun. It's a long day, I have to say. What many people don't realize is it's a paid position. So we are happy to have folks from all walks of life join us. Starting soon, in September, we will once again start having orientation meetings where you come by for about a half hour, 40 minutes, and we really give you the full scoop. Just call our office again to find out those dates, and we'll invite you to come to one of those and find out the details. As I said, it's a paid position, long days. We almost always can locate someone to work near their home so that they're in their neighborhood, if you will.
You know, we hear a lot about security and threats outside our election system. What steps are being taken?
That's a great question, because certainly, I don't even want to say a day doesn't go by, a day part doesn't go by that you don't hear something about election security. And I just want to assure people, not that everything is perfect, because we can never have that with cybersecurity, but that your election office has been working hard to do everything we can to keep things safe. And a couple of those things: Many people don't realize in Polk County, our election equipment is never attached to the internet. So that takes away a lot of the threat because you can't get in through the, you'd have to get in physically. And then speaking about physically, we have our election equipment and the program that programs that election equipment. We keep that in a locked room, under camera, under password, inside another locked room in a locked building. Additionally, we have a lot of tamper evidence seals. Now, that won't if somebody were to get through the locks and everything else, and they did tamper with one of our machines, we would know it. And we could immediately pull it out of operation and put something else in. And then, maybe not finally, but another thing people should be aware of, the number one thing, if you ask any experts, the number one thing that we can do to protect our elections, excuse me, is paper ballots. And here in Polk County, we have paper ballots. So even if there was a thought that something was tampered with, we can always go back and compare whatever the machine said to what a hand count of the ballots said.
And last but not least, one thing that a lot of people say that the hardest thing is giving the time to vote. How can residents avoid waiting in long lines?
Oh,
to
you know,
vote?
that's something else. You're right. That's gotten a lot of attention in recent years. I don't worry with the August 28th primary about lines. I just don't expect that high of a turnout. But generally speaking, if there are ever lines, it's first thing in the morning. We have a lot of early birds here in Polk County, and they get up and they get going, and when we're ready to open the doors at 7 o'clock, they're already lined up. So anybody that can wait a little bit later, maybe come at 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, I'll tell you what, I'll guarantee you for this August 28th primary, no lines if you wait till after 9 o'clock.
Let's talk hours real quick as far as for the primary election. How long will that be going on?
7 a.m. till 7 p.m. That's that long day those workers have to put in.
It's a really long day. Well, Lori, it's always a pleasure to have you in, and as the general election comes closer, we hope to have you back in and talk a little bit about that. If you
I
could,
look forward to it. Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thank you. Regardless of party affiliation, all voters may vote in the August 28th primary election. However, Florida is a closed primary state. This means that the registered Democrats may vote for Democratic candidates, and only registered Republicans may vote for Republican candidates. Registered voters with no party affiliation or with minor party affiliation are eligible to vote in nonpartisan and universal primary contests. Now, if you need more information, you can check them out on the web at www.polkelections.com or give them a call at 863-534-5888.